Welcome to Piano Video Lessons Year 1, Unit 6. Today's lesson is number 15, and we're going to be preparing to play Fur Elise. We just learned the Pachelbel Canon. We've already learned the Moonlight Sonata, so you can check back for those other videos. You can click the link here in the info card to come to PianoVideoLessons.com, where you can find all those lessons and also the ebook. Today's lesson is on 3/8 time, which we need to understand in order to play Fur Elise. Today's free video is sponsored by my patrons at Patreon. If you'd like to find out more or become a sponsor, click the info card. Let's get started. So today's lesson is a relatively short one. We're looking at the time signature of 3/8 time today. And the reason we're looking at this in this lesson is because if we examine our next coming piece, Fur Elise, we see that it is written in 3/8 time. So what does this mean? You are familiar with 3/4 time. So in 3/4 time, we have 3 quarter notes in one measure, and we can count them 1, 2, 3. So anytime we have a number 3 on the top, that's considered to be simple time. The numbers 2, 3, and 4 on the top of any time signature are simple time. So we could have 2/4 time, 3/4 time, 4/4 time. And all the bottom number tells us is what we should count. So in this case, the bottom number is 4, and that's the bottom number in the fraction 1/4. So we should be counting fourth notes, but we don't call them that, do we? We call them quarter notes. So in 3/4 time, we're counting 3 quarter notes in a measure. Now, if we see 3/8 time, instead of the bottom number being a 4, the bottom number is now 8. And in a fraction, 1/8, well, that's the same thing, isn't it? We do actually call those eighth notes. So instead of counting quarters, now we're counting 3/8. And if we look here, it says 3/8. And you can see up in this section here, where it's still in 3/8 time, we have 1, 2, 3 eighth notes, and then a bar line. So we simply count that 1, 2, 3. We can also have 2/8 time or 4/8 time and all kinds of other time signatures, but the 3 simple time signatures are 2, 3, and 4. On a side note, the reason they're called simple is because we divide each pulse in half. Simply 1 and 2 and 3, and in other types of time where we can, when we have multiples of 3, in our time signature, we actually divide it into more groups, but that is a more advanced topic. So we won't get into that today, but I just mentioned that that can happen. So here we have 3/8 time. And if we look down here, we can see that if we're dividing this into the ands, just as I said we can, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and. So these 16th notes that we learned in lesson number 12, you can see come into play. So we have now just a pair of them, because as I mentioned before, if you have a line, a beam across the top that connects a group of notes, it generally connects them into a group that's 1 beat long. It can connect them into bigger groups, but it's rare that you'll have them connected into smaller groups. So here we have 1 and 2 and 3 and. And here we have an example of how that counting is occurring, just as I've written out up here. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Again, we're counting to 3. And the grouping of these beats is the strong beat on the first beat, and then 2 gentler beats. So it's always 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, just as we did in 3/4 time. So down, up, up, down, up, up. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So now we can have a look at this example, and we can see that it's in 3/8 time, and we have 1, 2, 3, and then we have this critter here. All right, so we have this quarter note with a dot after it, and we know that that's 1.5 beats in quarter time. But we have to think for a second, how many of these is it in order to know how long to count? So one of these is half of a quarter note, so that's going to be 1, 2, and we also know that the dot is half of a quarter note, so it's another one of these. So this is going to be the longest note that we can play in 3/8 time. So this is just going to actually hold for 1, 2, 3. And then we can see from here that the equal half subdivision of an eighth of a single beat in 3/8 time is going to be these 16th notes. So here we're going to count our 3 beats, and we'll have the subdivision with and in between. And here we have the 16th rest, which we also learned in lesson 12. We're going to have 1 and 2, and there's an and rest, and here we have 3, and this is an 8th rest. We also reviewed that in lesson number 12. So down here we have another measure. Now let's look for the 8th notes first so we can find our beats. There's one here, and there's one here, and this is another beat in the middle. So we'll have beat number 2 and beat number 3. So again, looking for 8th notes, we have one here, so we'll have 1. That means that the next beat starts on the very next thing that happens. When in this case, that's the 16th rest, because we've used the entire first beat with this 8th note. So we start beat 2 on a rest, and then we have an and then we have the next beat, 3 and. All right, we always start on 1, and now we look to see how much we need to add to this to give us a full beat. So we have one 16th note, and then we have another 16th note. So that's our second half of the first beat. So right away we start our second beat. Here's the second half of beat 2, and here's beat 3 and the second half of beat 3. Now we see this is a whole entire beat in this measure. So we have 1, and then we have 2, and then we have 3. So will take a little getting used to, because you're probably used to counting these as half beats because they've always been a half beat up to now. So let's go ahead and count these rows. We'll start here, a first row, and we'll stop. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And now let's go to this next row and counting to 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Those rests make it a little bit tricky. You could rewind back and watch those again. But practice this clapping and counting in 3/8 time. And when we come back for lesson 16, the last lesson of unit 6, we'll work on Fur Elise. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, I would love it if you would consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. You can click the link in the info card for more information.